Hello, everyone. So, in the last year, I spent a lot of time writing this book, Crossing Boundaries, Traveler's Guide to World Peace. So, in the last year, I spent a lot of time writing this book, Crossing Boundaries, Traveler's Guide to World Peace. And I did this book because I wanted to tell people how to travel in the right way, how to engage with the places they go to, how do you engage with the community you travel to see and the people you're traveling with, but also to change the concept of how travel works, to change the concept of, is travel really only about distance, or is it about challenging ourselves, challenging what we believe in, and just being able to encounter the world in a much different way? And so today I want to give an example of some of the stories I talk about in this book, but specifically I want to tell one story. The main character in that story is my father, who I use quite a bit in the book. And I thought about yesterday. Yesterday was the Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel. And Palestinians don't know much about the Holocaust, so that's where the story would start. And I was, about 15 years ago, was the chairman of the Bereaved Families Forum, and we set up this big event where we brought experts, Israeli, Palestinian experts, to talk about the conflict. I invited my father to come, and it was one of his first ever meetings where he got to see this dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. And I was excited to have him come to this meeting. But then as a panel of speakers finished, and they asked who would like to ask a question. And my father was obviously the first person to go, me, I got a question, which terrified me because, like any son, I was a little embarrassed that he's going to say something I don't want him to say, especially in the organization I was leading. But obviously, also because they knew he's my father, they decided to have him ask his first question. And so my dad starts with his question, and I'm already terrified because I'm like, he never had this kind of encounter. Oh my goodness, what is going to happen? And my fear was in some ways justified because my father started with, so you mentioned this Holocaust thing. And as he started with those words, my heart dropped in my chest. No one has ever started a sentence with, so the Holocaust thing, and is planning to say something constructive. I felt like I just want earth to open up and swallow me in it. I wanted to disappear from this place. I slumped down a bit in my chair, hoping that no one would notice me. And my father continued, so this Holocaust thing, did it really happen? Or is it just a political manipulation used by the Israeli government? As you can imagine, there was dead silence in the room. The hall was filled with maybe 200 to 300 Israelis and Palestinians, many of whom are experts in peace building and experts in conflict resolution, but they all just looked like, I'll pass on this question. And the reason for that, I think the truth is many of the Palestinians in the room had the same question, but didn't want to offend the Israelis. And the Israelis in the room knew that the Palestinians had that question, but also didn't really want to stir things up, I guess. And my dad was the first person to decide to ask that question. And that silence continued until one man who decided to speak up. His name was Rami Al-Hanan. He's a very dear friend. And Rami is today the general manager of the Parent Circle Bereaved Families Forum. And he said, you know what? It's not fair for me as an Israeli to expect you to know about the Holocaust without learning about it. Now, Rami's father is a Holocaust survivor who was in Auschwitz. And so he continued and said, I would like to take you to the Holocaust Museum and have my father show you around. And that's what he did. And so my dad ended up going to the Holocaust Museum with 70 other Palestinians who were all bereaved families who lost their children in this conflict, and ended up going and learning about the Holocaust there. They had a lot of questions that were probably offensive. They didn't know what was offensive and what was not, but it ended up being one of the most meaningful experiences for both the Israelis and the Palestinians who ended up going. And it was the biggest group I knew willing to go to the Holocaust Museum. And it was all because somebody decided to ask a question that maybe was not politically correct, but it was important, but also was willing to take the time and travel and learn about those things that would challenge a lot of what he believed or thought. In a conflict, it is common for us to not want to sympathize and to understand the pain of the other because it kind of threatens our own pain. And the idea here was not to compete, not to try to prove who suffers more, but to really be willing to learn and understand. As a result of this trip, the organization ended up deciding that we are going to learn each other's history by hearing the stories of the other. And so for the next, actually, I believe the project is still going on today. For the last 15 years, the Israelis have been coming and learning from Palestinians about their history, things that Israelis don't learn about, don't normally connect with, things like the Nakba, the Naksa, stories that are hard for Israelis, but are very important for Palestinians, and Palestinians going and learning Jewish and Israeli stories. The Holocaust, obviously, is one of them, understanding the narrative of the Israelis. And it wasn't to compare this event with that event, whichever it is, but it's more to really challenge our way of thinking and to understand people on the other side, to understand who our neighbors are. And that's really what travel is all about. It's being able to learn about each other's lives, being able to connect with the stories of the other. And 15 years later, this project, as I said, is still going on. So this is one story from the book. I have many more, and I think in the next few months, the book will be out in just over 2 months. I'll be sharing many of the stories, not only from Israel and Palestine, but also from other parts of the world. Thank you so much for joining me, and see you in a couple of days.